Well, let's move on then to a reminder about the King's speech from last November. And in the course of the programme today, we're going to talk about two pieces of legislation that were on this. First is the Investigatory Powers (brackets Amendment) Bill, which is now the Investigatory Powers (brackets Amendment Act, and we'll talk about that a little later in the programme. But first of all, the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, because this was tweeted out by Silkie Carlo a couple of days ago. New David Davis MP has today warned that the government's new bank snoopers charter would erode financial privacy like never before in our country and must be dropped. How much longer will you attempt to defend the indefensible? Mel Stride, said Silkie Carlo, and this linked to an Express article. Now, in the article, this is what David Davis was saying. Under the proposals, everyone in receipt of money from the government's Department for Work and Pensions will be of special interest, including the 10 million Brits who receive the state pension. The idea that pensioners should be caught up in the net of this giant financial fishing exercise is completely absurd. So the legislation is going to allow the government access to people's bank accounts and so on. But of course, this is the least of the issues here. Now, if we go back again to I can't remember exactly when this frequently asked questions document was released, but we covered it at the time. And there were a number of claims that the government was attempting to address in their digital ID FAQ, and it's related to the legislation that we're talking about here. And the first claim that we talk about is here that the government is creating a mandatory ID card. And they claim that the fact is that the proposed legislation does not include any proposal to create either a digital or physical ID card. The government is committed to making it as easy as possible for people to prove who they are online and access the services that they need without creating mandatory ID cards. And of course, this is at the very least misleading. I would say it's possibly more than misleading because whether they mandate the use of ID cards in law, the mandatory nature of them is coming through the fact that you're required to have them for accessing government services online, because everything is being made digital, and many other services. So that is at the very least a misleading statement. Here's another one. This will make it easier for hackers to get hold of my data, is the claim. And they say that the fact is that cybersecurity is a critical priority for the government. We recognise how important it is to protect users and their data and have robust measures in place to ensure the security and integrity of online government services and systems. And again, at the very least, this is completely misleading because there have been some fairly major incidents of data breaches with, in this case, millions of children. The data breach for millions of children ruled unlawful, but actually it was a huge amount of data going missing for children in the UK. Another claim that they wanted to debunk in their digital ID FAQ, that sharing data in this way will erode my privacy rights. And their claim is that the government has stringent data protection processes in place. All data sharing is compliant with data protection legislation and guidance published by the Information Commissioner's Office. This will remain the case for any and all data sharing subsequent to the proposed legislation. This, again, is at the very least misleading, if not a complete lie, because when we look at the legislation itself, which is the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, and we look at the long title, it says, a bill to make provision for the regulation of the provision of information relating to identified or identifiable living individuals, to make provision about services consisting of the use of information to ascertain and verify facts about individuals, to make provision about access to customer data and business data, to make provision about privacy and electronic communications, to make provision about services for the provision of electronic signatures, electronic seals, and other trust services, to make provision about the disclosure of information to improve public service delivery, to make provision for the implementation of agreements on sharing information for law enforcement purposes, to make provision about the keeping and maintenance of registers of births and deaths, to make provision about the information standards for health and social care, to establish the Information Commission, to make provision about oversight for biometric data and for connected purposes. This will allow the broad brush sharing of data like we've never seen it before. This effectively removes data protection in this country in many, many areas, and not least our medical data. So when they say that it's making provision for medical use of data, we've got to realize that what they intend to do is to export that data. And just one example here, this is a scientific paper from 2018, in fact, and this was discussing the transfer of genomic data to third countries, which has now been enabled by Brexit, because, of course, once the UK was out of the EU's data protection regime, the UK could basically do what it wants. And so, in fact, this legislation enables exactly this: the sharing of medical data with companies outside the UK, and particularly in the United States, with impunity and no particular restrictions. Now, we're going to come on to the information the Snoopers Charter later on in the programme, which takes us even further. But this is quite an incredible piece of legislation which needs to be opposed, and I don't think there's the public awareness of what it actually does yet to build that opposition.